Hello everyone, I'm really glad you're here. Tonight, I want to help you let go of the day and ease into rest. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, and it means a lot to be part of your nightly routine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly helps. Now, settle in, close your eyes, and let's begin. Story 1. The Diner That Never Closed. Back when I was 22, I worked the graveyard shift at a roadside diner off Highway 19, the kind of place with cracked leather booths, flickering neon lights, and a jukebox that hadn't played in years. It was open 24/7, rain or shine, and catered mostly to long-haul truckers, tired travelers, and the occasional night owl passing through. My job was to keep the coffee fresh, refill the salt shakers, and keep the place spotless between the slow trickle of customers. The night shift was solitary, but I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. I liked the way the diner hummed under the fluorescent lights like it was dreaming. That's what I thought then, before I started noticing the things that didn't quite add up. The moments that came and went, like hiccups in reality. It began subtly. A booth that was clean 1 minute would have a coffee ring the next. The salt shaker I had just filled would be half empty again. I chalked it up to distraction, to being overtired. But then came the strange details. Orders written on my pad that I didn't remember taking. Checks rung into the register without my initials. Once, I found a plate in the dishwasher, still warm, with scraps of eggs and toast. But I had been the only one on shift, and no orders had come in for over an hour. I started checking the cameras to make sure I wasn't losing my mind, but the footage was off. Like pieces were missing, like time had skipped without warning. Then came the regular. That's what I started calling him, even though I never saw his car, never saw him enter or leave. He always sat at the same booth, back corner, under the busted ceiling fan that never spun. He wore a grey coat, wrinkled and faded, and a black hat pulled low over his face. His hands were always clasped together on the table, unmoving. He never ordered anything, never looked up. The first time I saw him, I asked what he wanted. He didn't speak, just sat still. After a few minutes of awkward silence, I turned away to grab coffee, and when I came back, he was gone. No door opened, no bell rang, just gone. The next night, he was there again. Same booth, same posture. This time I tried talking to him again, and when he didn't respond, I decided to leave him alone. But something about his presence unsettled me. It wasn't just his silence, it was the way the air changed when he was there. Heavy, pressurized, like sound itself became muffled. I checked the cameras after he vanished again. The footage showed the booth slowly filling with static until the screen whited out completely. When the feed returned, the booth was empty. My supervisor said the system just needed an update, but deep down I didn't believe her. Something was wrong with that booth. One night, I decided to confront him. He appeared just past 3 a.m., same as always. I walked up to his table and said, "I don't know what you're doing here, but you can't just sit all night and not order." He didn't move, but this time he spoke. Barely, a whisper, almost drowned by the hum of the fridge. "I'm waiting," he said. Just that. No explanation. Then silence. I didn't know what to say. I asked what he was waiting for, but he didn't answer. Eventually, I turned to clean the counter, and when I looked back, he was gone again. This time, I ran to the door, threw it open, scanned the parking lot. No footsteps, no tire tracks, just a flicker of the neon sign and the quiet hum of the highway. That night, the diner changed. Lights flickered more than usual. The coffee machine turned itself on. A salt shaker exploded, spraying white crystals across the floor. I felt a tightness in my chest, a pressure I couldn't explain. It felt like the diner was watching me, not just haunted, alive. That night the air conditioning kicked on in bursts, even though the thermostat hadn't been touched. The doors opened slightly on their own, then clicked closed again, and the jukebox, dead for years, sputtered to life. It didn't play music, just static. A low crackling that filled the air like breath. I started arriving late, hoping to avoid him. Some nights he wasn't there, but when he was, it was always the same booth, the same posture, the same atmosphere that weighed down the air. Then one night, he wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, also silent. Her hair hung in front of her face like a curtain. Her hands trembled slightly, twitching like she was fighting some invisible force. I didn't approach, just watched from behind the counter, paralyzed by a dread I couldn't understand. They didn't speak to each other, didn't move. After 15 minutes, they both faded. Not vanished, not disappeared, faded. Like smoke curling into the air until there was nothing left but the creak of the fan and the distant buzz of power lines. I started dreaming about the diner. Always the same sequence, me mopping the floor, the door creaking open, and the man walking in. But in the dreams, he was younger, no hat, eyes black as the spaces between stars. And in every dream, he said the same thing. It has to happen again. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the scent of coffee and old grease clinging to my sheets. I eventually told the manager I needed to switch shifts. She didn't argue, just said, "That booth always draws something." I asked her what she meant, but she just walked away, muttering something about how the place used to be a funeral home. I couldn't tell if she was serious. I don't work there anymore, haven't for years. But every time I drive that stretch of highway, I glance over. The neon still flickers, the windows still glow, and I swear, if I look fast enough, I can see someone sitting in the back corner, waiting. Maybe for someone, maybe for something, or maybe just to be seen again. I don't stop. I keep driving, because I've learned some places don't close when they're empty. They close when their story is done. And the diner's story isn't finished, not yet. In the last house at the edge of town. When I was fresh out of high school, I took a job with a small delivery company that ran odd-hour packages, mostly medical supplies, legal documents, or time-sensitive items that needed to reach remote places by morning. Most nights were uneventful. I'd drive down back roads, deliver a box, get a signature, and be on my way. But one night, I was assigned a drop-off that took me to a neighborhood I had never heard of, Everpine Lane. It wasn't on my GPS. The printed directions had been faxed in, and my dispatcher said only, "Just follow the instructions exactly, you'll know when you get there." Something about the way she said it gave me pause, but I didn't argue. I needed the hours. I left the warehouse around midnight, winding through narrow roads that got darker and more twisted with every turn. Eventually the streetlights disappeared, and even the stars seemed dimmer. After 20 minutes of silence, I saw a small wooden sign, Everpine Lane, barely illuminated by my headlights. The road was gravel, lined with tall trees that seemed too dense, too perfectly spaced. I rolled forward slowly, watching as a row of houses emerged from the darkness. They were all identical. 2-story homes with grey shutters, white siding and dark windows. No cars, no porch lights, no movement. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, but waiting. The address on the package was 117 Everpine Lane, the very last house. I passed numbers 101 through 115, each one perfectly aligned, perfectly still. As I approached 117, I noticed something strange. While the other houses were dark and cold, this one had its porch light on. A faint yellow glow spilled onto the concrete, flickering slightly like a dying bulb. I parked, double-checked the address, grabbed the small box, and stepped out. The air felt thick, heavy, like it had weight. As I approached the porch, I heard a sound behind me, a shuffle, like footsteps on gravel. I turned quickly. Nothing there, just the silence. I knocked once. The door creaked open on its own. Not wide, just enough for me to see a hallway stretching into dim light. "Delivery," I called out, my voice sounding smaller than usual. No response. I took one cautious step inside and set the box just past the threshold. "Leaving it here," I added, stepping back toward the porch. Then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, someone was standing, barely visible, just a silhouette. No motion, no sound. I froze, heart pounding. I didn't wait. I turned and walked quickly back to the car. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The porch light was off. Back at the warehouse, I filed the delivery report and mentioned that the door had been open. My dispatcher glanced at the address, then looked at me with an odd expression. "You went in?" she asked quietly. I nodded, feeling sheepish, just to drop it inside. She said nothing else, just walked away and left me alone at the desk. Later that night, I looked up the address out of curiosity. There was no 117 Everpine Lane listed anywhere. City records ended at 115. No house, no owners, nothing. I told a co-worker about it a few days later, and his face went pale. He said that years ago, before the company changed management, there had been another driver assigned to that area, same neighborhood, same address. He'd been found in his car on the side of the road the next morning. No sign of struggle, no wounds, just catatonic. Never spoke again. Just sat quietly, eyes always watching the corner of the room. They said he had been fine until he took the Everpine job. They said he started hearing things afterward, seeing figures outside his windows, talking to people who weren't there. A week later, I found another package on my run sheet, 117 Everpine Lane. No one mentioned it. No one acknowledged it, but there it was, staring back at me. I went to the manager, told her I wouldn't take that delivery. I offered to cover double the hours on another route, to work the warehouse instead. She didn't argue, just nodded and crossed off the address. That was the last time I saw it on a route sheet. It never came up again. No one talked about it, like the place had never existed. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of a sign out of the corner of my eye, just past the tree line or across a dark field. A wooden sign, hand-painted, Everpine Lane. And sometimes, when I park near quiet roads or stop at old intersections, my headlights will flicker. Briefly, as if something is standing in their path, waiting, watching, hoping I'll take the turn I once did. I never do. I keep driving. I don't deliver packages anymore. I left the job, moved states, started over. But that night never left me. That hallway, that silhouette, that porch light, they stay with me. In dreams, in the silence between songs on the radio, in the reflection of my rear-view mirror when I'm too tired to blink, and every now and then, I wonder what would have happened if I'd walked further into that house, if I'd asked the figure what it was waiting for. And I wonder if someone else will answer that knock. Story 3. The Woman in the Waiting Room. Years ago, I worked the overnight shift at a small medical clinic located on the edge of a quiet town, not far from the woods. It wasn't a hospital, just a walk-in urgent care facility that stayed open late for emergencies that didn't require full ER intervention. Most nights were uneventful. The nurse practitioner would rest in the on-call room unless we had a patient, and I stayed at the front desk answering phones, checking in the rare walk-in, and keeping the coffee machine running. It was quiet work, and I usually passed the time with books or podcasts, but there was something about that building that never fully settled in my bones. Maybe it was the way the lights flickered in the back hallway, or how the security cameras would glitch for no reason. Or maybe it was the waiting room, and the woman who kept appearing there, even when the doors were locked. The first time I saw her, it was around 2:15 in the morning. The automatic front doors were shut, and the alarm system was armed. I had just refilled the coffee and was heading back to my desk when I caught movement on the security monitor. One of the cameras showed the waiting room, and in it, sitting completely still, was a woman. She wore a long white dress, her hair draped over her shoulders, and her hands rested neatly in her lap. At first I thought I must have missed her arrival somehow. Maybe the alarm hadn't triggered properly. But when I checked the logs, nothing. No doors had opened, no sensors tripped. Still, I did my duty. I grabbed the intake clipboard and headed toward the front to greet her. The waiting room was empty, completely still. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old carpet. The chairs were in their usual places, no sign that anyone had been sitting there. I turned back toward the reception window and glanced at the monitor again. She was still there, on the screen, sitting, watching. But when I turned back around, the room remained empty. That was the first time I felt it, the deep cold that seeped into my spine, not from fear, but from something older, something that had waited a long time to be noticed. I reset the cameras, chalked it up to a glitch, and returned to my desk, pretending I hadn't just seen something that didn't want to be seen. She returned the next night. Same time, same chair, the same white dress and folded hands. I didn't leave my desk this time. I just stared at the monitor, and this time she turned her head slightly, like she could see me too. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew. Her face was expressionless, not angry, not sad, just there, present. I called the nurse practitioner and asked her to take a look. She mumbled something about Ambien and ghosts, then drifted back to sleep. I sat alone, the glow of the monitors painting shadows across the room. And the woman sat too, watching me. I started arriving early for my shifts, checking the security system, triple locking the doors. I even placed motion sensors near the front entrance just to be sure. But none of it mattered. The cameras would blink once around 2:15, and there she'd be, always alone, always silent. Sometimes she'd sit in different chairs, like she was choosing a new angle to view the room. Once, she stood by the front desk staring through the glass. Her eyes never blinked. I started keeping a log, noting each appearance. It was always the same hour, same minute, same weight in the air. Then things changed. She started bringing something with her. A small bundle, cradled in her arms like a swaddled infant. She held it gently, never revealing its contents. But one night, she looked down at it, and her lips moved. No sound came through the monitor, of course, but I watched as she whispered to whatever she held. A soft, circular rocking motion followed, like she was comforting something too fragile to survive the world. That was the first time I cried. Not from fear, but from sorrow. Whatever she was, whatever had brought her here night after night, she was grieving. The nurse practitioner began noticing things too. Cabinets opened without explanation, medical tools placed on trays she hadn't touched, lights that clicked on in rooms she hadn't entered. One night, she walked out of the break room looking pale. "I heard a baby crying," she said, "clear as day. But when I checked every room, nothing." I didn't tell her about the woman. Not yet. I didn't want to share it. Somehow it felt private, like the two of us, me and the woman, had entered into a quiet understanding. I watched her. She watched me. And that was enough. Then came the final night, the last time I saw her. The monitor blinked at exactly 2:15. She was standing again, bundle in her arms, eyes fixed on mine, but something was different. Her posture was softer, her expression lighter. She turned toward the doors and slowly walked forward, vanishing just as she passed the threshold. No flicker, no blink, just gone. The next morning, when reviewing the security footage, the entire night was intact, except for one section. A single minute of static at 2:15, the only visual left was the door sensor log, which for the first and only time recorded, "Front door opened, no wait detected." I never saw her again. I worked at the clinic for another year and the cameras stayed quiet. No more flickers, no more whispers, no more white dress in the waiting room. But I still think about her. I still wonder what she was waiting for. Maybe she needed to be seen. Maybe she just needed someone to witness her grief. Or maybe, whatever she had been holding all those nights, she finally let go. Sometimes I pass the clinic when I drive through town, and for a brief moment, I think I see her sitting there again, hands folded, head slightly turned, watching through the glass. But when I blink, the chair is empty, and the room is just a room again. Story 4. The theatre that performed for no one. I worked nights as a part-time maintenance assistant for a historic theatre that had been standing for over a century, an ornate, crumbling gem tucked into the oldest part of the city, where the bricks were dark with time and the street lamps gave off a soft golden glow. The theatre had long since stopped hosting big performances. It was mostly used for rehearsals, local productions, and occasionally rented out for weddings or lectures. My job was to lock up after events, clean the aisles, check backstage for stragglers, and make sure everything was secure before the building went dark. Most nights, I was alone. The rest of the crew would leave around midnight and I'd stay until 3 a.m., tidying and doing rounds. I used to love the quiet of the place, the way it held on to its history like a deep breath. That was before I started hearing the applause. The first time it happened, I'd just finished sweeping the main aisle. The theatre was empty, the last rehearsal having ended nearly an hour earlier. I stood at the edge of the stage, looking out at the rows of velvet-covered seats, when I heard it. Soft clapping. It echoed faintly, not from the speakers or a recording, but from somewhere real. I froze, broom in hand, listening. The sound faded as quickly as it had begun. I checked every row, every balcony. Nothing. No one. I told myself it was old wood settling or the acoustics playing tricks, but deep down, I wasn't sure. Something about the rhythm of the clapping. It had timing, intent, like a person showing appreciation. After that, the sounds came more frequently. Applause that began and ended in sudden bursts. Whispers from the wings. A woman's laughter drifting from the dressing rooms long after they'd been locked. I started working faster, leaving earlier, but some nights the building wouldn't let me go so easily. Lights that had been off would turn back on. The stage curtain would billow gently, as if stirred by a breeze I couldn't feel. Once, I found a single rose placed neatly on center stage, fresh, fragrant, its stem cut clean. There had been no performance that day. No rehearsal. I was the only one with keys. One evening, the manager asked me to retrieve an old soundboard from the storage level beneath the stage. It was a part of the building I rarely visited, cold, damp, and filled with forgotten props and set pieces. As I descended the narrow stairs, I passed old trunks, cracked mirrors, mannequins in moth-eaten costumes. I found the soundboard tucked behind a stack of broken lighting rigs. When I turned to leave, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before, heavy, wooden, its brass handle tarnished with age. I tried it. Locked. As I turned away, I heard something behind it. A violin. Just a few notes, barely audible. My breath caught. I leaned closer. Silence. I backed away and never returned to that level again. I started asking around. Other staff, former performers, even the night guards who worked before me. Most gave vague answers. A few laughed nervously and said, "Oh, the theatre has its ghosts." But one older stagehand, a man named Greg, told me something that stuck. "There's something in that place," he said. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It just wants to keep performing. Like the show's never ended." He said he once saw someone standing in the spotlight after hours, reciting lines from a play that hadn't been performed in decades. When he got closer, the stage was empty. "The theatre remembers," he whispered. "It wants to be remembered." That same week, I was locking up when I heard footsteps on the catwalk above the stage. Heavy, deliberate, as if someone was pacing. I called out. No answer. I climbed the narrow backstage ladder to check. The catwalk was empty, but the moment I stepped off it, I looked down and saw the stage lights slowly come on, one by one, illuminating the stage in a perfect wash of gold. Then the curtain rose, creaking softly, and from the speakers, without anyone at the board, music began to play. Slow, classical, a violin and piano duet. I stood there, frozen, watching the empty stage come to life. Then the spotlight came on, shining down center. Dust floated through the beam, swirling like snowflakes, and in the middle of that light, a shadow formed, faint, just a suggestion of a figure. A woman in a long gown, arms raised, mid-pose as if she were waiting for her next line. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched. And for a brief second I felt peace, a strange warmth, like I was part of something sacred, a performance just for me. The music faded, the light dimmed, and the curtain fell. I left the building without finishing my checklist. After that night, I treated the theatre differently. I didn't speak above a whisper. I walked softly across the stage, and sometimes, when no one was around, I would sit in the front row and just listen. Occasionally, I'd hear a note, a footstep, the soft shuffle of costumes brushing across wood, and every now and then the curtain would twitch, as if waiting for its cue. I never told anyone what I saw. Some things aren't meant to be explained, they're meant to be experienced. Eventually I left that job, moved on, but the memory of that night has never left me. Sometimes I visit during the day, buying a ticket to a local performance, slipping into the same seat I used to clean, and during the quiet moments between scenes or just before the show begins, I look toward the wings, toward the shadowed parts of the stage, and I wonder if she's still there, waiting for her cue, hoping someone remembers the words, hoping someone is still watching. Story 5. The Patient in Room 9. Several years ago, I worked the night shift at a mid-sized rehabilitation hospital, a place meant for patients recovering from major surgeries, strokes, and traumatic injuries. The building was modern, filled with clean lines and soft lighting, but its layout still held that eerie quiet common to all hospitals at night. There was something about the low mechanical hum, the blinking monitors, the distant echo of footsteps, that made even the calmest wards feel watched. I was a floor tech, meaning I handled non-clinical tasks like equipment runs, trash collection, and helping move patients from room to room. I had no real authority, but I knew the halls better than anyone. That's why, when I noticed room 9 had become different, I was the first to speak up. Room 9 sat at the very end of hallway B, near the emergency stairwell that was rarely used. It was just another patient room, same pale walls, same adjustable bed, same TV mounted high in the corner, but the patients placed in that room never stayed long. Some asked to be moved after just one night. Others didn't ask, they screamed. One elderly man ripped out his IV line and tried to crawl out of bed, shouting that someone was standing in the corner. A young woman recovering from a car accident refused to sleep unless the door was left wide open and the lights kept on. And once, I found a child sitting upright in the bed at 3 a.m., wide-eyed and silent, just staring at the wall, like it was whispering to her. I mentioned it to a nurse I trusted. She gave me a look like she knew exactly what I was talking about. That room's been troubled since before I started, she said. Some say it used to be part of the old psych ward back when this place was a sanitarium. I thought she was joking at first, but the hospital had been renovated dozens of times. Maybe she was right. That corner of the building always felt older, like time moved differently there. Even the air smelled slightly off, like antiseptic, and something buried underneath it, something musty, forgotten. I started noticing that when I walked by room 9, the lights would flicker more than anywhere else. The call button would go off without anyone pressing it, and on more than one occasion, I passed by and saw the television on, even though the room was unoccupied. The most disturbing night happened during a shift when the hospital was at near full capacity. A man in his 40s was assigned to room 9 after gallbladder surgery. He was calm, quiet, and very polite during admission. I wheeled him down myself and helped settle him into bed. He thanked me, smiled, and said he was looking forward to finally resting. A few hours later, I passed by on a routine supply run and saw his room light blinking. I peeked in. He was sitting up, staring into the corner of the room, the same corner every previous patient had complained about. When I asked if everything was okay, he turned to me and said, "I didn't know this was a shared room." I asked what he meant. He shook his head and said, "He hasn't moved since I got here, just stands there." My heart dropped. I checked the room again. Empty except for him. I told him he was alone, but he just looked back at the corner and whispered, "He's still there." I tried to reassure him, checked the equipment, made sure he hadn't been over-medicated. Everything was normal. I left to report it, and when I returned 15 minutes later with a nurse, the man was asleep, or at least pretending to be. But the heart monitor showed an elevated rate, his body rigid under the blankets. I started leaving that wing for last during my rounds, dreading walking past that door. Every now and then I'd hear tapping inside. Once I heard laughter, dry and hollow. One night, after a code blue had pulled most of the staff away, I was sent to deliver an oxygen tank to room 7, just down the hall. As I passed room 9, I noticed the door slowly swinging open. No air vents were running, no draft. It opened fully, slowly, silently. I looked inside. The room was dark, empty. But the TV flicked on, right as I stepped in. It showed static for a few seconds, and then a face appeared. Not a live feed, not a broadcast. Just a grainy, pale face with dark, sunken eyes, staring directly at me. Then it blinked off. I ran straight back to the nurse's station. No one believed me. They checked the room, no issues found. The TV was unplugged. But I know what I saw. After that, I refused to enter room 9 again. I wasn't alone in that. Nurses swapped assignments just to avoid that hall, and patients who stayed there longer than one night always had trouble sleeping after discharge. Some of them returned just to walk the hall, as if drawn back. A few said they felt like they had left something behind. A shadow, a memory, a version of themselves that hadn't made it out with them. Eventually, the hospital director ordered the room closed. Officially, it was for electrical upgrades, but no work was ever done. They just locked the door and left the light off. Occasionally, a new hire would try to use it and be quietly redirected. No one talked about room 9 openly, but everyone knew the corner, the face, the flicker of something standing just beyond what your eyes could register. Some say the hospital's original architect was committed before construction finished, that he claimed he'd seen people wandering the blueprints, watching him from the paper. Others think room 9 was never meant to be a room at all, just an empty space that refused to stay quiet. I don't work at that hospital anymore. I transferred to a clinic across town, but sometimes, late at night, I'll be walking a quiet hallway or standing in a still room, and I'll feel it. That hum. That silence just a little too dense. And I'll remember room 9. The way people whispered its number. The way light never fully reached the corners, and the way, for just a moment, a patient would look past you as if you weren't the only one standing there. Story 6. The late bus that never arrived. I used to work as an overnight dispatcher for a small town transit authority. Most of our buses stopped running around 11 p.m, but we had one route that continued until just after 2 a.m, Route 103, known to most of the drivers as the Ghost Loop. It passed through the outskirts of town, hit a few poorly lit industrial stops, then ran by an old residential stretch that had mostly been abandoned since the 90s. It was a quiet ride, rarely more than a few passengers, mostly late shift workers or night owls heading home. But over the years, Route 103 had gathered a reputation for being strange. Drivers said they'd see people who weren't there. One claimed the radio would go dead at the same stretch of road each night. Another swore he once picked up a woman who disappeared by the next stop. I didn't believe most of it until the night one of our buses never came back. It was a chilly Thursday in October. The air felt heavier than usual, the kind that makes you feel like something is about to happen. I was working alone in the dispatch office, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the routes on the screen. Everything was normal. Buses were returning one by one. Then, at 2:17 a.m, I got the final check-in from bus 103. The driver Ken, a quiet man in his 50s with 20 years on the job, radioed in to say he had one more stop and was heading in. I acknowledged it, logged the time and went back to reading. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No return. I called his radio, no answer. I tried his phone, straight to voicemail. The GPS tracker showed the bus at a dead stop near Old Mill and Sycamore, a stretch of road I knew had no real buildings, just forest and a crumbling rest shelter long since boarded up. I called a backup driver who lived nearby and asked him to check it out. He arrived at the location around 3:15 and called me with confusion in his voice. "There's no bus here," he said. "No tire tracks either. It's just empty." I double-checked the tracker. Still said the bus was there. I refreshed the map. Now it said it was in motion, only it showed the bus moving in a slow, perfect circle, looping endlessly on the same half-mile stretch of road, over and over again. The backup driver circled the area but saw nothing, not even headlights, just that same flat silence. By morning, the system stopped showing any signal from bus 113. It was as if it had never existed. The log still showed Ken's last transmission. The bus roster still listed it as active. But the vehicle? Gone. Ken vanished. The police got involved, of course. They searched the woods, canvassed the area, pulled security footage from the nearest intersections. Nothing. It was like the bus had slipped into another layer of the world, one where roads don't lead anywhere and headlights don't pierce the dark. What made it worse was that a week later I got another ping from the GPS. Brief, less than 2 seconds. Route 103, same road, same loop. Then gone again. A few nights later, I was sitting alone in the dispatch room when the radio cracked. Static, then a voice. Faint, almost a whisper. "Dispatch, this is 103. One passenger left, just trying to find the stop." I froze. It was Ken's voice, no question. I tried responding, my hands shaking, but there was no reply. The radio fell silent again. I stayed in the office until sunrise, too afraid to even move. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I just sat there, waiting, checking the map every few minutes. But there were no more pings, no more voices. Just the memory of Ken's calm voice drifting through a channel that should have been dead. Eventually I told my supervisor, who dismissed it with a tired sigh. "We lost 2 drivers on that route back in the 80s, she said. "They both quit the next day, said they didn't want to drive people who don't exist I asked what she meant, but she waved me off. People think buses are about schedules and wheels and fuel. They forget. Buses are about waiting. And some places, they've been waiting too long. After that, Route 103 was quietly shut down. No official announcement, no rerouting. It just disappeared from the charts, like it had never been there. I sometimes wonder what Ken saw on that final loop. Did he stop for someone standing alone in the fog? Did he let them on, thinking they were just another late worker headed home? And did they speak, or sit in silence, watching him through the mirror, never blinking? The thought keeps me up some nights. I still work for the Transit Authority. I run logistics now, mostly daytime hours. But sometimes I check the logs just to be sure, and once, just once, I saw a signal. Route 13, passenger 1, destination unknown. I blinked, refreshed the screen. It was gone. I never told anyone. There's no point. Everyone who worked nights back then has moved on. New drivers, new buses. But I keep the radio on in my car now. I keep the frequency set low. Just in case. Because part of me believes that Ken is still out there, driving a road that doesn't end, circling the same bend, waiting to finish a route no one remembers. And part of me wonders what happens if someone picks up that final transmission. What happens if you answer back? Story 7. The Emergency Call Box. During my college years, I worked night shifts as a student safety escort. The job was simple. Patrol the campus, walk students to their dorms upon request, and monitor the blue emergency call boxes scattered around the grounds. Most nights were boring. Long stretches of silence broken only by the occasional group of tipsy undergrads or a late library run. The campus was safe, well lit, and small enough to cover on foot within an hour. Still, protocol required that we do hourly checks on each emergency call box to make sure the lights worked, the buttons responded, and the lines connected back to dispatch. We had over 30 of them, each with a glowing blue light mounted above it like a lighthouse dotting the walkways. The one that always bothered me was Box 27, positioned between the old science hall and the edge of the nature trail. That trail used to be part of the original campus over 100 years ago, before they stopped expanding into the forest. The box was mounted on a crooked pole and half covered in ivy, and even though we trimmed it every month, it always grew back faster than the others. It wasn't on a main path, barely anyone passed it, but it was still part of our required sweep. Whenever I approached it, my radio would crackle and my flashlight would dim slightly. I joked about it with the other guards, but most just shrugged it off as interference. Still, I never lingered there longer than I had to. Then came the night it activated. It was close to 1 a.m, and I was sitting in the safety office, sipping from a cup of burnt vending machine coffee, when the red light on the panel flashed. The log screened red. Box 27, emergency activated. That alone was odd. We hadn't received a single legitimate activation from that box in the 3 years I'd worked there. I grabbed the radio and called it in, but there was no response from the student dispatcher. I assumed he was in the restroom or had stepped away, so I headed out alone to investigate. The air was colder than usual, crisp, still. No wind, no animal sounds, just the crunch of leaves under my boots as I made my way toward the trail. As I approached Box 27, I noticed the blue light wasn't glowing. The call panel was lit red, meaning it had been pressed, but the bulb above it was completely dead. I pressed the reset code into the small keypad and leaned in to listen. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft, almost distant, coming from the call speaker. "Can you help me?" it asked. Female, calm, almost too calm. I cleared my throat and responded, "This is campus safety. Are you in danger?" There was silence for a few seconds. Then she spoke again. "I can't find my way back." I asked where she was. She replied, "Here, by the trees." I turned toward the forest. The trail behind Box 27 hadn't been maintained in years, blocked off by a gate and a fading wooden sign that read, "No access after dusk." I scanned the area with my flashlight. Nothing. Just brush and branches. "Do you need medical assistance?" I asked. There was a longer pause this time. "They don't want me to leave," she said finally. "They said I have to stay until I find someone else." My skin went cold. I backed up slowly and radioed in again, this time requesting backup to the old trail near the science hall. No response. I checked my radio screen. It was still on, but the signal bar had vanished. Then the call box crackled again. "You can help me," she whispered. "Just come into the woods." I didn't answer. I turned and started walking back, faster than I should have, heart pounding. Behind me, I heard the call box click off, followed by static. The entire way back, the forest felt like it was leaning in, like the trees were listening. When I returned to the office, the panel was dark. No logs, no red light. The dispatcher was sitting at the desk, headphones in, completely unaware. He said the panel had never flashed. Said there had been no calls. The next day, I checked the system logs myself. There was no record of Box 27 being activated, no audio file, nothing. I asked around. One of the older guards pulled me aside and told me a story I hadn't heard before. Years ago, before the trail was closed, a student had gone missing out there. A young woman. They found her jacket, her phone, even her shoes, but not her. They assumed she got lost, disoriented, maybe even ran off, but some believed she was still out there. Or something like her. "Box 27 was installed after that," he said. "Some people think it's connected to her somehow, like it's still picking up her last call." I avoided Box 27 after that. I swapped patrol routes with anyone who'd take them. No one questioned me. Everyone had their own strange encounters to whisper about when the sun went down. And though I no longer work on campus, I still think about her voice sometimes. The way it was calm, almost peaceful, as if she had accepted whatever kept her there. And I wonder who else might walk by that box late one night and stop when it lights up. Who else might hear a voice say, "I can't find my way back," and whether they'll make the same choice I did or step into the trees to help. Story 8. The Warehouse on Lockdown. A few years ago, I worked security for a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of a mid-sized city. It was a massive concrete structure, rows of loading docks, endless aisles of shelves, and cavernous ceilings where shadows always seemed to settle. The company shipped everything from cleaning supplies to electronics, and with trucks coming and going day and night, security had to run 24/7. I was the overnight shift supervisor. My job was to patrol the perimeter, review access logs, and ensure the few workers who stayed late were safe. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was predictable, and the isolation didn't bother me. At least, not until the night we went into lockdown for a breach that came from inside. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was doing my second round. The building was mostly quiet, save for the low rumble of refrigeration units and the occasional beep of forklift parked in standby. The security office sat at the front of the building, facing the main road. Inside were a bank of monitors showing live footage from over 30 cameras. Every corner of the warehouse was covered, every dock, every hallway, every emergency exit. That night, as I glanced at the screens, I noticed something strange. Camera 12, aimed at the south dock corridor, was showing movement. A figure walking steadily toward the center of the building. Only one problem. No one should have been there. I radioed the 2 floor employees still clocked in. One was on break in the lounge. The other was restocking in the northwest quadrant. Neither of them had reason to be anywhere near the south dock. I zoomed in on the feed. The figure wore a hooded sweatshirt, head down, hands in pockets. No badge, no safety vest. I initiated standard lockdown procedure, shut all exterior doors, alerted the on-call supervisor, and started toward the south end with flashlight and clipboard in hand. As I reached the hallway in question, I found it empty. No sign of anyone. I checked the side doors. locked. I checked the emergency exit, still armed. But when I got back to the office, the figure was still on the screen. Still walking. Only now it was on camera 15, 2 corridors deeper. That was when I noticed something else. The timestamp on the feed didn't match the others. It was lagging by almost 3 minutes. I tapped the console, thinking it was a glitch, but when I rewound the footage, the timeline didn't update. It was as if that specific camera was showing something slightly out of sync, like it was running on a loop from the recent past. I flipped through the feeds again. The figure had vanished, nowhere to be seen. I rewound the feeds twice more, no entry point, no exit, just brief appearances on 3 separate cameras, always walking, never pausing, never turning. An hour later, the access control panel showed a door opening in Zone 4. It shouldn't have. That section was used for overflow storage and had been sealed off for weeks. I went to investigate. The light above the door was flickering, casting long, twitching shadows. The air inside was colder than the rest of the warehouse, despite the lack of refrigeration. Rows of forgotten crates lined the walls, and there, in the center of the room, was a single pallet with a clipboard resting on it. The clipboard was from last year, signed out to an employee who had left the company 6 months ago. Her name was Jamie. I remembered her. Quiet, dependable, worked nights for 2 years. She'd quit suddenly, no explanation, just never came back. I picked up the clipboard, curious, and a page fluttered to the floor. A single note scribbled at the bottom in shaky handwriting. He's still here. I took it back to the office and reviewed her exit records. The logs showed she had scanned out on her final night, but the timestamp was missing, just blank, as if the system didn't register her departure. I checked the camera footage from that date. Camera 15 again caught her walking down the same hallway the figure had used. After that, nothing. No sight of her leaving. The footage stopped abruptly, then resumed 10 minutes later with an empty frame. The on-call supervisor arrived just after 4 a.m. I showed him the footage, the clipboard, the access logs. He said the system must have been bugged, told me not to escalate it, said we'd check with IT in the morning. But the look in his eyes didn't match his tone. He knew something, or he had seen something before. "We don't use Zone 4, he said flatly. "Keep it that way." Then he left without another word. That was the last shift I ever saw him on. He transferred departments a week later. No farewell, no notice. Just gone, like Jamie, like the figure on the screen. When I kept working there for 3 more months, every few nights, camera 15 would flicker. Sometimes the figure would return just for a moment. Other times it was a sound, a footstep in the wrong hallway, a door sensor triggering without a name. One night, I reviewed the live feed and saw my own image, still at the desk, staring blankly at the monitor. Except I wasn't sitting. I was standing in the break room. The feed lagged again. When it caught up, the image corrected, but I knew what I'd seen. I started asking myself if whatever haunted that place wasn't just a person, but a moment. A glitch repeating itself over and over. A memory embedded in the system, showing itself through cracks in the present. I finally left after the night I caught the figure in person, or thought I did. I had just turned a corner near the back of the building when I saw him, tall, hooded, standing at the far end of the hallway, his head lifted slowly, just slightly, like he was aware I was watching him. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then he stepped backward, directly into the wall, and vanished. No sound, no door, just gone. I walked away that night and didn't return. I didn't collect my final paycheck. I didn't explain. I just needed to forget. But even now, when I pass by industrial buildings at night or hear the low hum of fluorescent lights, I sometimes think I see someone just beyond the edge of the frame, someone moving through a hallway that doesn't exist anymore. And I wonder if that warehouse was ever really haunted by a person, or if the building itself remembered things we weren't meant to recall. Patterns, presences, footsteps from shifts that never ended, and doors that open, not to let something out, but to let something back in. Story 9. The Man at the 24-Hour Laundromat. In my early 20s, I lived in a small town where not much happened after dark. The streets emptied out, and the only places open past midnight were a single gas station, a donut shop with flickering lights, and the 24-hour laundromat near the edge of town. It was one of those places that look frozen in time. White linoleum floors, humming fluorescent lights, machines from the ATS that still required quarters, and a television mounted in the corner that only played static after 11 p.m. I didn't have a washer in my apartment, so I'd do my laundry late at night when it was quiet. No waiting, no one staring, just me, the machines, and the buzz of electricity. But one night, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. It was around 1:45 a.m. I had just loaded my clothes into the washer and was sitting in one of the plastic chairs by the window reading. The place was empty except for a homeless man sleeping near the vending machine. I'd seen him before, quiet, never caused trouble, always gone by sunrise. Everything felt normal until I caught movement in the reflection of the window beside me. A man, tall and thin, was standing near the back row of dryers. I hadn't seen or heard him enter. He wasn't carrying laundry. He wasn't reading a book or using his phone. He was just standing, staring into the open mouth of dryer 8. I turned around, expecting him to look away or nod, but he didn't. He didn't acknowledge me at all. His face was long, pale, eyes dark as ink. He wore a jacket that looked far too heavy for the warm spring night. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, posture still. I stared at him for a long moment before returning to my seat. I felt a prickling on the back of my neck, the kind that tells you someone's watching, even when they're not looking directly at you. I glanced back again. He hadn't moved. Not a muscle. Just stood there, still staring at the empty dryer, like it had something important to say. After 20 minutes, my washer beeped. I gathered my laundry basket and moved to the back wall to transfer my clothes. As I passed behind him, the man finally turned slightly, just enough for me to see the edge of his mouth curl. But when I looked back a minute later, he was gone. No sound of the door opening, no footsteps, just gone. I stood up, checked outside, even peeked into the bathroom. Nothing. It was as if he had vanished between blinks. I sat back down, heart thudding harder than I wanted to admit. I told myself it was nothing. A weird guy. Maybe someone high, maybe someone trying to scare me. I glanced over at the homeless man near the vending machine. Still asleep, completely unaware. The dryers hummed. The static from the TV clicked rhythmically. But the air had changed. It felt tight, thicker. I sat quietly for the next 20 minutes, waiting for the dryer to finish. When it finally buzzed, I moved quickly, gathered my warm clothes and stuffed them into the basket without folding. As I turned to leave, I glanced once more at dryer 8. The door was open. Inside, a single black glove lay on the metal drum, pristine and perfectly placed. I hadn't seen it there earlier. It wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time, not sure why it unsettled me. Then I noticed something else. Written in marker along the inside rim of the dryer, faint but legible, was the word, "Hello." Just that, nothing else. I left the glove. I didn't want to touch it. I walked out quickly and didn't look back, practically jogging to my car. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced into the laundromat one last time. The lights flickered, and in the corner where the man had stood, the reflection in the window showed someone still standing there, even though no one was inside. I didn't go back to that laundromat for 2 weeks. I used the one across town, even though it was smaller and more expensive. When I finally did return, it was a cloudy night. I brought a friend with me and told him about what I'd seen. He laughed, said I was just tired, that it was probably nothing. But when we got to Dry Rate, the glove was gone. Still, the word hello remained. We joked about it and moved on. He stayed with me until I was done, then we left together. But that night, I got a text from an unknown number, no message, just a picture of Dry Rate, taken from inside the laundromat. I changed my number, told the laundromat manager about the text, but they just shrugged. Said they didn't have cameras. Said they didn't even know where the glove had come from. Stuff shows up sometimes, the woman muttered. Usually leaves on its own too. I asked if anyone had ever seen a man standing in the back corner just watching. Her face tightened, just for a second. Sometimes, she said, but not recently. I asked what she meant, but she changed the subject, offered me a free wash token and moved on. I still do my laundry late at night. Old habit, I guess. But I don't go to that laundromat anymore, even if it's closer, even if it's cheaper, because sometimes I'll drive past it and in the corner of my eye I'll catch a glimpse of someone inside, standing, unmoving, watching the machines spin. And I know that if I ever go back, if I ever look into Dry Rate again, the glove will be there, waiting, and this time it might not say hello, it might say my name. Story 10. The Graveyard Shift at the Call Centre. When I was 24, I worked the overnight shift at a National Roadside Assistance call centre. The office was located on the 12th floor of a downtown building, but after dark, only our floor stayed lit. The rest of the tower would fall into silence, floors dimmed and locked, giving the eerie sensation that we were floating high above a sleeping city. The job wasn't bad. Answer calls, dispatch tow trucks, calm down stressed travellers stranded on highways between 2 and 4 a.m. Things would slow down, and most of us passed the time by chatting, watching videos, or staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows into the glowing emptiness below. But then there was the red line, the internal emergency line that was only supposed to activate in the most extreme situations. The phone almost never rang, until it did. It was a Thursday night, cold and quiet. I was alone at the front desk while the rest of the team huddled in the break room. The regular calls had stopped, and I was halfway through a boring news article when the red line blinked once, then rang, low, mechanical and slow. I froze. My training kicked in. I picked up the receiver and said, "Emergency line, this is Mark, what's your location?" At first I only heard static, then a whisper. So faint, I almost missed it. 12, 12, 12, over and over, like a voice echoing from the bottom of a well. I repeated my question more firmly this time, but the whisper kept going until it just stopped. The line went dead. I checked the incoming log. It said, internal extension 1212, but we didn't have that extension. I flagged my supervisor and told him what happened. He looked annoyed at first, thought I was messing around, but when he saw the call log, his face changed. He left to check with building security and came back looking pale. "There is no line 1212, he said. There never was. I tried to brush it off, probably a prank, a wiring error, something explainable. But later that night, the phone rang again, this time a different voice. Still faint, still broken by static. "I need help," it said. "I can't leave the 12th. I asked for a name, for a location. Nothing. Just, "Don't let them lock it again." Then silence. That's when the lights in the far corner of the office flickered. 3 of the cubicle monitors turned on, showing blank blue screens. They hadn't been powered up all night. The tech team reviewed the footage. The call appeared on the internal system. But no source, no trace. They rebooted everything, ran diagnostics and blamed a server hiccup. But from then on, the red line rang every few nights, always around 3:12 am, always with a different voice. Male, female, young, old. Some crying, some laughing. One just kept repeating, "It's not a floor, it's a holding space." Every time we reported it, IT shrugged it off. Maintenance said there were no issues. HR eventually told us to stop logging the calls unless they were customer. The line, they said, was for simulation testing. No one believed that. Not even the managers. Things got worse. People started seeing movement in the reflection of the glass when there was no one behind them. I personally saw a woman walk from the break room toward the elevators on a night I knew I was alone. I followed her. She turned the corner and the hallway was empty. Then the elevator dinged. The doors opened to reveal nothing but a wall, the interior lights flickering like a heartbeat. A co-worker named Jenna swore she heard breathing over her headset even when the line was silent. Another employee claimed she fell asleep during a break and woke up sitting in someone else's cubicle, surrounded by cold air and static playing from every unplugged phone. The final straw came during a holiday shift. The building was even quieter than usual. Just 4 of us on duty. At exactly 3:12, the lights dimmed. The phones went dead. The windows, normally showing the night skyline, went black, as if the city had vanished. Then all the computer monitors powered on at once, every screen showing the same image. A door. A plain, grey door with no handle. A few of us stood frozen, too scared to speak. Then the red line rang, but no one moved to answer it. The phones began ringing in sequence, one after the other, until the sound filled the room like a scream. I couldn't take it anymore. I powered down my station, walked out, and never returned. I sent in my resignation by email and never looked back. A few others quit too. Jenna ended up transferring to a daytime department in another state. I heard rumors that they started rotating employees to different floors, never letting anyone work more than 2 weeks straight on the 12th. One guy said it was because the floor records, whatever that means. I didn't want to know. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I think about those calls, the voices, the feeling of being watched from inside your own building, and I wonder who or what was calling. Were they ever really gone, or did we just stop listening? I still avoid high-rise offices, still flinch when I hear a desk phone ring too late at night, because I know what can hide between the floors. And I know some numbers were never meant to be dialed.